There are people who are right now leading by fear and chaos because that does feel powerful.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
for inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up, and then we're going to talk about what the heck's going on in Washington, D.C. these days. And then later on the pod, we sit down with Lesley Curtis, who is the founder of Sagely Center. We're going to talk to her about polarization and trauma. It's a good pod, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, and you?
I'm fighting a sneeze really bad.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
should we pause?
No, because it's not going to go away.
Okay.
Sorry, it's been like that for 2 hours.
Well, the audience will wait in
So-
anticipation.
Right. So apologies if it comes up. But yeah, I was in the kitchen earlier making my lunch, protein drink that
Yes.
we always make every day. You've come up with this great recipe for a latte.
It's nothing special.
I mean, as a non-coffee drinker, to me, it's pretty special because it's really good. Anywho,
Yeah.
you used to make them for me every day.
I did.
And then I finally decided I needed to learn this skill for myself.
Well, if there wasn't rocket science.
Listen, again, as not a coffee drinker, I mean, I have to read instructions to put grounds in the regular coffee. Anywho, so when you were teaching me how to make the coffee protein drink, you were very specific in saying when you're put it all together in the mixer thing, the little Ninja blender, make
Yes.
sure you have the lid on tight and hold it down.
Yes.
Because
Because
the
why?
heat, because there's heat, and
Yes.
heat is prone to expand, and if the lid pops up, you got coffee everywhere. Anyway,
Yes.
so this has been going fine.
Yeah.
Weeks I've been doing this by myself,
Yeah.
right? No
I've
problem.
not heard any explosions coming from the kitchen.
No. Well, today I had everything on tight, and I had the lid down. I was holding it with my hand like you taught me, and
Uh-huh.
I mean, nobody can see me gesticulating right now and
Right.
showing you all the motions. Anyways, you can imagine I have my hand on the top of the
Yes.
blender, and I have my other hand on the base of it to keep it, steady. And I turned it on, and it didn't matter. Like, coffee went everywhere. All over my face, all over the kitchen.
Oh,
and
I'm disappointed I didn't see it.
I can't believe you didn't hear it. And then up my nose. And so
Are you done with coffee?
if you didn't know, coffee in your nose burns really bad. And so I've just had this
Yeah, because
feeling.
it's hot.
Well, and that, yes. So I've just had this feeling for the last couple hours. I just need to sneeze, but it just won't come up.
Mhm.
So anyways,
Well, when you do, make sure I have a espresso cup ready to
that's
go.
right. Ooh, gross. Anyway, so that's how your email finds me today.
Wow.
How about you?
Well, I did not have a morning like you did today.
No, but in better news, so finally, after several rounds of being on the losing side of the World Cup games,
Yes.
one of my teams I was pulling for finally won.
And which team was that?
Spain.
You were rooting for Spain over France this week.
Yes.
And why? Why? Do tell.
Do you really want to know?
Yes, I
'Cause
really
haven't
do want to know
told
because
you.
I know.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Okay. I like their uniforms
I
better.
knew exactly where that was going. Missy roots for uniforms.
Okay, so here's the thing. What was the one team that had the bubble guppy uniform?
That was Belgium.
Belgium. No, I can't root for that. I just can't. Anyways, and then France had collars on their uniforms. It's hot. You don't put a collar on a uniform shirt when it's hot. I was feeling like my neck was I don't know, hot for them. I didn't like it.
Yeah, newsflash. They were in Arlington indoors.
I don't care. It just made me itchy just thinking of pulling on that. Anywho, so
Okay, fair.
I had to root for Spain because they didn't have
Yeah,
collars
well,
on their
congratulations
So
to
my
Spain and to you.
and to me. My decisions are made very well informed and technically, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
been several games now since the team I was pulling for won.
Well,
so.
congratulations.
Yeah. So we'll see who ends
life
up-
lesson on the coffee and life lesson in soccer too.
Yep.
So
So in other know nothing news, I guess.
know if it's know nothing news, but yeah, lots going on this week. Missy, senators are dropping like flies in Washington, D.C.
Okay, yeah, and I have a beef about that too.
Okay.
This is the thing. I have many more things to complain about,
Hmm.
but this is the one stupid thing, is that Lindsey Graham had to die and disrupt my sleep for an entire night.
Oh,
Let me tell you what happened. So I don't even remember what night it was. Sunday night, maybe, I
yeah.
guess. And we had a storm come through, and in the middle of the night, like a big flash of lightning, and so our electricity flashed off. And then Alexa decided when it came back on to turn all the lights in the
Well,
house
sure,
on.
that's what she
Right.
does. Yeah.
So you got up to deal with that. And in the meantime, I was looking at my phone because I was going to check the radar to see what else was, heading our way, how bad this was. And of course, I got a notification that Lindsey Graham had passed away. So
Yeah.
this was between 2 and 3 a.m. in the
Right.
morning. Well, so of course, once I saw that, I wasn't going back to sleep, right? Because
Yeah.
then I had to do a deep dive and like,
Well, of
did
course.
did they make a mistake? Was it really Mitch McConnell? Was it
Yeah.
Lindsey? Like, what's going on
Right.
here? So yeah.
Yeah. So, yes, you're absolutely right. The senior senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, passed away on Sunday night. It appears as though he had a heart condition and passed away. There's a lot of online speculation and conspiracy theories
Always.
floating around. But this comes on the heels of Kentucky senior senator Mitch McConnell
Hmm.
being MIA for a month. And the governor, Andy Beshears of Kentucky, actually had to issue a proof of life statement asking for the senator's proof of life. And so we get this photo. Again, lots of talk
I was
about
going to
the
say, in
photo
this
itself.
day and age, what exactly is proof of life?
Right,
Because is
exactly.
anything at this point? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, I digress.
So, yes, I mean, lots going on. We still don't really know the condition of Mitch McConnell. Pundits are saying they've spoken to him. Other Republican senators said
Well, I
they have
mean, you
spoken.
spoke with him earlier
Well,
this
yeah,
week,
yeah, I
in all
did. Yeah,
fairness,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. We
Right.
chatted on the phone. But no, I mean, just golly, just they're dropping like flies, and we're just gonna have to wait to see what the condition of McConnell is. But what we do know is that Senator Graham did pass away, and it's been interesting, at least from my perspective, Missy. It's been really interesting to see the responses that have come out after his passing. You had the kind of routine platitudes
Mhm.
of his fellow senators and people talking about what a wonderful guy he is and the relationship that he had, sense of humor, which he did at times. There's no doubt about that. But it seems as though so many people just totally just stopped talking about all the things, all the policies that he supported that have brought so much harm to individuals and families, not only in this country, but around the world.
So I have a real beef with all of this. And I will admit that going into the interview, I was just feeling already especially agitated, which, you know, actually plays into our interview topic really well today.
Yeah.
Talking about trauma. I feel like I was having a bit of a response. I don't know if it was trauma response, but I was just feeling very irritable. And
Hmm.
and because of what I've seen going around. And so I'm going to work through this and talk to you about this in real time. My apologies. I will probably say something stupid, put my foot in my mouth, whatever, but I'm going to work through this. I feel like we know that Lindsey Graham had issues of some sort.
Hmm.
Okay. Granted, we can speculate about what those were.
Sure.
What makes me angry is, like you said, the totality of his work and the impact he had on the country is largely, in my opinion, not great
Right.
and was hurtful to a lot of people, will continue to be hurtful to a lot of people.
Hmm.
What is very upsetting to me now is to see, again, you want to come out and say, our thoughts are with his family. Clearly, they're hurting. They've lost a family member. Fine. But now you're going to come out and tell me this really like sweet story of a moment that you had where he was kind or thoughtful or showed integrity or character or whatever the case may be. Why are you trying to out him as a good guy now?
Right.
I don't think the totality of his work suggests that for
Yeah.
me in many ways. Again, I'm working through this in real time. I'm not saying
Now,
that he might not have had some moments, but this is what makes me mad about politics in general is it's always after the fact that the people who are fighting so publicly against one another and making us the country so mad at each other, once somebody's out of office or once somebody's dead, then it's like, oh no, he was a really good guy.
right.
It's like, first of all, I have issue with that because his work does not speak to that.
Sure.
And second of all, quit trying to out him as something different. Just say, "You know what? That's tragic. Thoughts and prayers with his family." I don't know. It's complicated. I get death is
Well,
complicated when people are complicated characters.
yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot to unpack there in what you just said.
Yeah.
But
Go.
yeah,
Good luck.
let me try to cover some of it at least. First of all, we all do this. Or no, we don't all do this, but our tendency is to try to begin to soften a person when upon their passing. I have done it in the past. Anybody that I would consider an enemy of sorts, whether that's political or theological, I have tried to say something nice about them in death. That is, I don't know, it's a human tendency
Well,
or if
but
it's
you're a
something.
preacher. You've also had to stand behind a pulpit
Yes,
and speak about someone who was rough around the edges, shall we say?
yeah, absolutely. But this feels more and more like people are making arguments and trying to convince us that Lindsey Graham was a good guy because he did not kick his dog.
Mm.
But the news is he kicked somebody else's dog,
Lots of other somebody else's, yeah.
and stop trying to convince me that he was a good guy because he didn't kick his dog. And that's what it feels like to me a lot of times when we try to do this. And the older I get, and maybe it's because I'm becoming more cantankerous in my old age, the less patience I have for that.
Mhm.
This is not me trying to dehumanize Lindsey Graham. He was flesh and blood. He was a child of God. You know, all the usual platitudes that we say. As you said, he has a family. They are mourning his passing. I get that, and I understand that, and I do have sympathy for them during this time. But let's also not just totally gloss over what he stood for. And he took a lot of positions that harmed a lot of people in this country and in other countries.
Mhm.
And I'm just done with it. I am tired of it. And I'm just going to start. This is who he was. And this is who he is. And so, yes, I agree. I'm tired of trying to entertain that argument that he's a good guy because he didn't kick his dog, even though he kicked everybody else's dog. Secondly, this whole idea of, well, we had this relationship with him that you didn't know about. You and I have talked about this in the past, and I recall the story of talking to the chaplain of the U.S. Senate, or
Mhm.
he spoke to us in a committee or in a board meeting that I was a part of in Washington D.C. one time, and he talked about those relationships behind the camera,
Mhm.
and he said the worst thing that ever came to the U.S. Congress was C-SPAN because when the camera's on, they treat each other like dirt, but then behind the camera, you know, they do have genuine relationships with one another. We never get to see that.
We're just the pawns in it, and it's just maddening.
It is just maddening. And it's almost as though if they were to model that for us, if they were to really show the American people, this is how government works, this is how we get along, even though we have policy disagreements. To me, that is a better model than going toe to toe and trying to rip each other's throat out. That is the tactic of today's. It's obliteration politics. You have to obliterate your enemy.
Mhm.
And it was created by Newt Gingrich, and there was no sympathy. You couldn't compromise. And the days of compromise are over. It's just all seek and destroy. And it's maddening. And this is has brought us to this point in the country. And so when, yeah, we got the news that Lindsey Graham had died, it was triggering. I mean, a lot of these things that you and I have been talking about this week.
Right. That's how I'm feeling today. So I'm probably like you, a little more cantankerous than usual. So it was good that we had somebody who's an expert in trauma coming on and talking to us, and we'll probably be hitting her up for some more conversations before too long. But I did want to say about the interview again because I came in here feeling all in my feelings and feeling one certain kind of way about things. But it was interesting because Leslie did kind of, I mean, like any good prophet, stepped on my toes a little bit in the very best way and helped me see a couple of things differently that I really appreciated. So I don't want to give away too much, but I don't know. I came away from it feeling a little less sanctimonious than I did, which is a good thing.
Yeah. And, you know, the best thing that, you know, I think she gave us, and something that we've talked about a lot in the past, and even mentioned it a moment ago in my diatribe, was always remember the human side of people. And yeah, there are consequences to the things that they support, the things that they espouse.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, they are human. And being human means you have a human experience where you come out of trauma, you have your own experiences. There's a reason that you are the way you are. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And Leslie reminds us about that this week.
Yes, and she is so kind and so thoughtful and so wise, and sometimes I just need that little voice on my shoulder, probably all the time.
Yeah, no comment. Okay. So Missy and I will be right back with Lesley Curtis to talk about her ministry at Sagely Center and the significance of trauma. Stay tuned.
I'm Callie Cawthon-Friels, Director of the Faithful Pride Initiative at Good Faith Media. Through Faithful Pride, we seek to elevate the work of queer people of faith who are changing the world in beautiful ways. LGBTQ+ people are made in the image of God, just as they are, and as a queer person myself, I know that embracing my queerness has made me a better and more whole person of faith. Perhaps the same is true for you too. To learn more about the work of the Faithful Pride Initiative, check out goodfaithmedia.org.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Lesley Curtis is the founder of the Sagely Center and a trusted guide for leaders working in high stress or trauma impacted environments. She holds a doctorate from Duke University, where her research explored how historical trauma shapes collaboration, belief, and decision making. She has also taught leadership and innovation at the University of North Carolina Graduate School and served as a practicum instructor at the UNC School of Social Work. With her team, she also writes and podcasts at Lead Consciously, exploring new ways of thinking about leadership, change, and organizational success. Lesley, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you. That was a lovely, yeah, you said a lot in a short period of time. Thank you.
Yeah, I do that a lot. Just ask my co-host here.
I mean, a recovering preacher is a recovering preacher. Recovering preacher
Yeah,
is all I
that's
have
true.
to say.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyways, Lesley, thank you for joining us today. I will say trauma is just such a buzzword these days, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I know, Mitch and I try our best to learn and to be aware of trauma and dealing with, people around us and its effects. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today, especially about how trauma impacts, our society on a broader scale. Before we get into that though, this is our first
Okay,
time meeting, so I wanted to know if you would share a little bit about your background and specifically kind of what brings you to this work.
wonderful. Well, thanks so much, and I'm really happy to be here. I live in Philadelphia, and I think what brought me to this work, I mean, really, I'm an educator, and I always have been, and I've always really been invested in helping people collaborate across differences and multicultural work and collaboration. My doctorate, I really focused on the history of abolitionist movements and history of people working against discrimination. And that's when I realized just how much we're impacted by trauma historically and in our personal lives, right? And so the more that we know about that, the more that we can kind of spot the residue of past experiences in the stories that we tell, then the more likely we are to feel a sense of peace and comfort and belonging with each other. And so it yeah, I would say I started out just as an educator, but really wanting to create the perfect environment for learning and moving forward. So that's how I got into this.
So, Leslie, I mean, one of the topics that you have been researching and writing about recently has been this deep polarization that we find ourselves in, not only politically, but
Yeah.
just culturally at large. And specifically, you've been writing about the contribution of trauma towards polarization.
Yes.
And within that broad spectrum, there is this concept of narrative analysis that you have brought to light. So, for our
Yes.
audience, can you talk to us about what narrative analysis is? And second, how can it offer a way of understanding and help us work through this polarization that we're currently experiencing?
Yeah. Well, I think probably it'd be easier to start with talking a little bit about what we mean by trauma, right?
Okay.
And so one of the things we're talking about is sometimes when I work with people we think I'm only dealing with somebody who's like the victim of violence, or maybe they had experienced an earthquake or a car accident or something like that. And that is true, but we're also talking about experiences of fear that are unprocessed, or moments when my fear comes up and I might not be engaging with an situation as clearly as I could otherwise, right? There might be something that is making it a little bit more intense than it needs to be. And when we talk about polarization, right, if I have had routine experiences, all the information I get online, if all of those things tend to validate this experience I've had of feeling like you're coming after me, you don't respect me, I'm not safe here, you don't believe I belong. If all of that is coming at me, then there's an intensified experience. And so we want to get to the place where we can kind of come back to and offer people a sense of safety and security. And so that's why I talk about it as education. You're really kind of creating the conditions for people to be able to pull down from that feeling of intensity and then figure out, okay, how could we move forward at this lower level of intensity? And so I think that's where we talk about the polarization and how we might be able to move forward in those ways.
So, do you think the current climate of polarization, do you think it is? I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but do you
Yeah.
think it is causing a lot of trauma for those of us that just have to exist in this polarization these days? Because
I
the
mean,
intensity level
yeah.
that you're talking about seems to be always ramped up.
Yeah, it really is. But there's also the fact that it sort of like mirrors or matches what we're used to, right? So if you come from an environment where you've been told like you always have to really work really hard, life is struggle, you've never had enough, well, we're not going to get there until we defeat these people or we win these people, or something like that. And then somebody comes along with a message that mirrors that. It feels normal. You kind of take it in, and then it just keeps going, right? Like I know people who are listening to these kind of really intensified podcasts all the time. I knew, Fox News is one of the things, and it's like if it doesn't match some level of like anguish or intensity, then you would just turn it off, right? But if it makes sense to you and it feels like there's a threat out there and I need to know more and more and more about this threat, so I need to keep listening to it. There's this intensity, and so the way to go at that, right? You can't say, that's not true. This isn't like you can't go at it from this sort of like fact-based intellectual piece. You have to go at it from like, I need to give you a feeling of nervous system regulation, right? I need to give you a feeling at least once, maybe twice, maybe three times. We'll keep going. That this threat that you're spending so much time, cued into, this threat is actually not immediate. It's not, Fox News is not going to give you the the answers
Yeah.
for
That's shocking.
how. So but that's what it is. It's like it's knowing, and that's one of the reasons why I like talking about what we know about trauma is that it's more than intellectual, right? It's really this like somatic kind of full body experience. And so giving people that connection, the experience of relationship, the experience of like in this one moment, in this one classroom, in this one conversation, you don't have to fight, and then you just keep going with it. It's how would call it? It's gentle work. It's compassionate work. It requires a lot of self awareness. It requires our own sense of compassion, and it also just really works. It's literally like bringing somebody down.
So you're kind of speaking quite a bit to me towards that interpersonal work of dealing with trauma. And like you said, it's not always a car wreck or something, a singular event like that. It's kind of anything that's caused you intense fear that you're responding to. The more we're learning, the more we're understanding that many of us are working through something,
Yeah.
and how it impacts us. However, I just know that there's critics out there who just say, "Oh, get over it. This is just life," who don't understand that trauma lives inside a body and that trauma is passed down. So I guess
Yeah.
my question is sort of twofold, is that how do you help folks understand who are dealing with people around them that trauma is in fact real, it is physical, it is passed down, it's cyclical. And so for example, the thing that's coming to mind right now is every time a black or brown person is, murdered by anyone, especially a police officer, the collective trauma that that community experiences is, I feel like, real and valid, but it's really difficult. Like, I don't know how to explain that because this isn't an area I study, but I understand that it's there. So what would you say to help us explain or understand that better?
Okay. So there's a lot that I could respond to in there. So let me do so in a couple different ways. But I wanted to mention that last month I just spent a week at something called the Mind and Life Institute. They do a summer research institute every year.
Hmm.
And one of the things they do is they invite people who are psychologists, anesthesiologists, doctors, Buddhist monks, spiritual practitioners. And this year, their focus was on this process of depolarization. And so one of the things that we have figured out, and there is scientific research in this, is that there has to be this putting together of both a subjective experience and an objective experience, right? So I like what you were saying, Missy, about understanding like this is internal to you, and then there's also this, experience that's happening. And so you gave me an example, right, of police brutality and violence against people of color, and that also has historical component as well, right? And so when we're working with that, there's a way of working at it on an individual level, right, of somebody who might have a personal experience or a personal connection to it, and then you're looking at trauma in the system or in the
Right.
body, right, in the way that that's emerging as well. And so one of the things that we find is that the parts mirror the whole. And so even working on those smaller levels of processing it, working it on an individual level, creating different kinds of relationships. So creating spaces where we do feel safe,
Mhm.
acknowledging that when we see something like that that repeats a historical trauma, it's just bringing something really deep forward. One of the things you said, Missy, was, people are like, "Oh, just get over it." But that tends to be that kind of intellectual component. There's something deeper there. And so those kinds of the strategies that we know work are ones where we can acknowledge the threat, bring some sense of co-regulation, of nervous system healing, and those kinds of things that come together. So one of the reasons why I mentioned that blend of the objective and the subjective is that it does have to come together. And that works for historical trauma, and it also works for other kinds of issues in our lives.
And I think that just the challenge in kind of those bigger, like you said, systemic issues that cause trauma is helping those who historically have been perpetrators or who have not been impacted to understand the role in it and the role that is necessary to make steps towards some sort of healing. And I think the acknowledgement piece is so big for a lot of people is acknowledging that that exists, that it's real, and that it's understandable, and then what can we
Yeah.
do to help repair?
And a lot of people talk about this process of metacognition, and I do really like it because we know that this works for trauma healing and kind of the neuroscience of it. And maybe this goes back a little bit to what you were saying before about the narrative or the story that we tell, is that we want to create more and more space between reaction and response, but we also want to get to a point where you can identify as the witness of an event rather than the victim of it.
Mm,
And that creates just a little bit more space. Like, we're not going to get to a point where nothing bad ever happens or that pain doesn't exist. It's not about that. It's just getting to a point where it feels neutral, where it feels integrated, and where we feel like we can move on. And one of the great things is that when we do that work ourselves, then we tend to be the catalyst for a sense of, a lack of polarization, a sense of belonging, a conversation that can be peaceful and collaborative. And that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, Dr. Curtis, I need to pull up a couch and I need
Okay.
some help. And this podcast doesn't have enough time for the kind of help I need.
Truth.
But here's kind of going back to a question we asked previously, and use the illustration of an individual who watches Fox News all the time and
Yeah.
ingests that and just has this high sense of anxiety. Well, the reverse can be true as well. And so one of the things that I suffer from is constantly reading the news, watching the news, and the topics that we discuss here at Good Faith Media are extremely heavy,
Yeah.
are extremely volatile, and just they cause a lot of anxiety when we deal with them.
Yeah.
So at the same time, there are those of us who feel as though we are in the midst of this existential crisis,
Mm.
that democracy is teetering on the brink, and that there is a concerted effort to dismantle democracy, to change for those of us who still live in the faith based world, trying to change the very message of Jesus, for those of us who call ourselves Jesus followers. There is this concerted effort. So, how do we, because I'm all for reducing polarization, but also, it seems there are moments where we do have to stand up and combat or counter what is going on in the world. And I don't know how to balance my passion for the issues that we're talking about and the education I need to do to educate myself on these issues, while at the same time trying to depolarize the world that I'm living in. Is that making any sense whatsoever?
Absolutely. No, it's a beautiful statement, and I'm glad you brought it up because we're not trying to say that, "Oh, everything's hunky dory, let's all just hug," right? It's not that. I mean, that would be similar to what Missy's saying if somebody's saying, "Oh, just get over it."
Mhm.
I mean, these are deeper things and bigger things. One thing I do wanna say is that I think it's really important to acknowledge the impact of the way that we receive our news, because anything that you engage with, you will see more of it, right? That's just the way the algorithm works. And so if you do see something that's scary or anger producing, that's going to get amplified simply by the mechanism that gives us our news, right?
Mhm.
So that works, whether you're listening to Fox News or whether you're listening to MSNBC, right? And so I know a lot of people who feel kind of attached to just caring for others or worrying about others. They've sort of learned to kind of take in other people's feelings or emotions. And so it can feel like a lead to burnout, really, when you're just in that environment all the time. So I do think that it's important to know that that kind of thing is happening. And then looking past at, um, you know, what if, and I'm thinking about the narrative or the stories that we tell, what if this is a time where we really are having to face something big about our fear, something big about our the lack of love that we experience? What if this is a time where we could learn from it? What if this engagement with getting on the brink of losing democracy, or what can I learn from it, right? What
Mhm.
can I do in this moment in my life, that is a counter to this kind of hatred that I see moving forward? And I know that maybe that doesn't feel particularly satisfying because it's not like we're going to be able to make a huge change everywhere all of a sudden, but it really is kind of coming back to what you actually can control.
Yeah.
And I do think I mean, there is a pretty strong belief in looking at the world or doing work this way, that really the only thing that actually transforms is love. That's the only tool that we have. Um, there are people who are right now leading by fear and chaos, because that does feel powerful. But I think the goal underneath is to say that's actually not what power is.
Okay. Well, that helps. I don't know if it completely helps my attitude, but it certainly gets me in the right direction.
I think the question that I would want to ask in this is about having any sort of feeling of love towards somebody who who is in that space, and getting their news and loving feeling angry and, you know, acting in ways that are so antithetical to what I believe that we stand for. We're supposed to stand for both as a nation or as, you know, people who of faith or just, you know what, decent human beings. And so how do you I'm not this isn't necessarily a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
thinking I'm putting into
Yeah.
Right,
words
right.
maybe some of what you're saying because you put it much nicer than I did
Sure.
because I have
Well,
just zero sympathy
right.
anymore.
Well, I mean, Leslie, I can find myself like right after the election. I
Yeah.
was leading up to the election. I was constantly watching the news, consuming the news, both written, video, listening, and I was so ramped up. I could feel the tension. I could feel the
Yeah.
anxiety. You know, I could almost feel the trauma that I was putting
Yeah.
myself in. And so I made a conscious decision to withdraw from taking in all of that news. I still
Yeah.
tried to stay informed. And even now, there are times where I just get so consumed by it that once it kind of has this hold on me and I can feel
Yeah.
the physical presence that or the physical reaction that I'm having to what I'm taking in, I have to learn to set boundaries. And
Mm.
it's one of the
Yeah.
things I think that a lot of us have difficulty doing, and that is setting boundaries, whether it is a personal relationship, whether that is taking information in, making certain that we don't put ourselves in situations where we are going to be traumatized.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that leads me to think about some of the ways that I have done work. I think I have this in my bio. I think you probably mentioned at the beginning is working with people who work with trauma impacted populations. So some of that is there's a skill that I talk about, which is the me, not me. And it's really understanding that like you can be here in the presence of this really activated population, people who are angry. You can be in the presence of this, but what you're doing is you stay still next to it, right? Like you know that right now in this one moment, in this one one body in this one relationship in this one time that you're safe and then you're going to keep moving with that. And so you're really working to bring down the anxiety, but if there's any kind of confusion, and I would see this a lot. So, for example, I worked with some educators who were helping to support undocumented students, right? And it's a really, really scary time in this moment. But some of the people that I was working with also had their own experiences of immigration or threat. And so sometimes what we would do is just acknowledge that those moments or those experiences would sometimes turn up and make them feel really anxious. And then they would actually have a harder time trying to assist the person that they were working with, right? And some of it was also about kind of working on like what does this person need right now in this moment and what are the resources that I have that I can provide to them in this moment. I think it's very easy, in the situation that you're talking about where you're just kind of consuming all of this negativity. It feels like you don't have boundaries, but it also you're completely overwhelmed because what are you going to do with all that?
Mhm.
Right? We're not really made to take in that kind of information. So kind of I do really feel like that me, not me skill is really useful. And then you start looking at, okay, what can I do in the moment? And in those moments, you feel empowered to create different types of relationships that are going to counter the historical trauma that we're talking about, but also this kind of traumatizing period that we're moving through.
Yeah. Well, Leslie, I decided to start a podcast with my wife, and that has brought on it's really so much trauma in my life.
That's a whole trauma trigger right there. So, Leslie, and I guess maybe this kind of feeds into what I was trying to say earlier and probably going to get myself into trouble, but something else, another buzzword, going around
Yeah.
today is privilege. I know from looking at your writings and listening to some of your episodes of podcasts that that's something that you also work in as far as how that impacts our ability to see and process trauma and like you said deal with, interpersonal things. And I guess that's one of the things I'm so frustrated with is that I just wish that people could just sit for a minute and just think about their privilege and understand it and just sometimes it's uncomfortable, but just be with it and say, okay, it is what it is, it exists, instead of just dismissing it. And so that's where I feel like, and I think you've given an example of a family member that you were trying to work through some things with. And when someone comes from a place where they have felt that fear or felt disadvantage, that
Yeah.
it's harder to get to a place of understanding, yes, and also I exist in this place of privilege when I'm dealing with other people. All that to
Mm.
say, help us work through that. What suggestions do you have for those of us who do have privilege as we are trying to understand and work through and help repair or help a community that maybe does experience trauma in a productive fashion?
That's a great question and something to think about. But one of the things that I really like, there's a concept in Tibetan Buddhism that the observed and the observer form a unit.
Mhm.
And so in that case, you can kind of change the experience by working with either one or the other. And so I say this because when I meet people who come in and say, like, oh, I really want to challenge discrimination, but I'm so privileged, I've never had anything bad happen to me
Mm.
in my life, so I don't know anything. That's not true.
Mhm.
And so when you come in and your kind of like first foot forward is, I'm just here to help. I've never experienced anything bad at all. That's usually a deflection, right?
Mhm.
But one of the things that you're also doing in that moment is you're kind of asking a certain population to hold all of the pain, and that's not true, right? And so in those moments, I think one of the you were talking about the article that I wrote about my cousin that I worked with, who just has struggled more with just less education, less access to careers and finances, and just the kinds of things that I had access to through just more education and more
Mhm.
awareness. So I have mentioned that, but also there, when we're talking about historical trauma, right? There's discrimination with racial discrimination, history of enslavement in the United States. There's also gender discrimination. There's any
Mhm.
number of things. But one of the things I think can be really useful is to do the level of self-examination and say, like, where have I felt like I have not received enough? Where have um, how am I coming into this situation wanting to help someone else because it will make me feel better. And therefore, I might be kind of projecting some of my own pain or some of my own lack in this moment onto somebody else. And so there's a restorative justice model that I like to use. And I talk about this kind of triangle where you have a victim and a perpetrator. And then the only sort of idea we have about how to fix that is the hero, right? Or
Mm.
the savior. And so usually when we're kind of stuck in that dynamic, everybody wants to be the savior because that feels really good. Nobody really wants to be the victim, and we sure as heck don't want to be the perpetrator.
Mhm.
So one of the things we're wanting to do to get out of that triangle where you're just sort of like, you know, stuck moving from one position to the other is to just acknowledge the emotions in it, right? And to understand that we're really wanting to kind of process that emotion. That doesn't make me feel good. That doesn't make me feel like I belong. Um, but the more attachment we have to the understanding, like I'm a good person only if I can help you, then I kind of always need people to
Right.
help.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So we actually want to try to get out of that as well.
So it makes me think of again when we started this talking about trauma being kind of a buzzword and then privilege being a buzzword, and I do feel like that's when those terms and concepts come to light, that's a good thing as we become more educated and aware, but also sometimes not. And what I liken it to, I've talked to Mitch about this a lot, is when people will say something happens, they're like, "Oh, that's my OCD, that's my OCD," and that drives me nuts because obsessive compulsive disorder is a diagnosis, and it's a diagnosis that is serious, and people are impacted in their daily lives. And then just, folks, as we have our little
Yeah,
quirks, have clung on to that, and to me, it cheapens the impact that that has on some people's lives. And I feel like trauma is a little bit the same way. Um,
yeah,
People, oh, I've got, trauma and trauma. So I don't know, a year or so back,
yeah,
I was trying to tell a story on here on the pod, and I didn't want it wasn't trauma. It was just something that happened that I was impacted and,
yes.
affected me, but it was something I could laugh about later. So I've just kind of
Mm-hmm.
coined the term drama response instead of a trauma response. And
Mm,
so when
mm-hmm.
something happens that, scares me or is impactful, it's, I laugh and say, well, that's a drama response.
Mm-hmm.
How, in taking my silly little metaphor, how can we delineate those 2 things? Because obviously we have things that impact us on the daily that affect us emotionally or maybe our gut punch or something, but how can we tell when okay, like you said, you can't come into a conversation saying, "I've never had any of these things that happened to me."
Yeah.
But how do you delineate these are the things that I need to deal with because it's coming from that place of fear where I haven't gotten enough versus this was just an inconvenience or something that happened that impacted me, but I can move on from?
Mm. That's also a really good question because one of the reasons why I like to use the word trauma is that we are talking about something that really does exist outside of our awareness and that we need to understand like no intellectual, no like just get over it. Why are you doing it this way? I talk about how, like a diet culture where you just
Mhm,
say like just stop eating so much and you'll all figure it out. Like this sort of like punitive way that we go at things that just doesn't work. So that's one of the reasons why I like to talk about trauma or use it that way because we do need to know that it's a bigger thing, it's a holistic thing, and it's about coming into more and more awareness and being able to hold complex things. And so I'm also, I again I talked a lot about narrative, but I'm also interested in the stories that we're telling about how we're showing up. So I actually feel like there's maybe a little bit of judgment or blame in the drama response because you're sort of like, oh, there are
mhm.
certain things that qualify as trauma, and my experience doesn't, it's not enough. So I'm just being a drama queen,
Yeah.
right? And I can understand like why you might want to do that, but sometimes, we know actually that if somebody, let's say something really challenging does happen, we know that if somebody has the resources, if they have somebody that can help them process things, if that happens within like the first 30 days, we know that these kinds of things are really useful
Mhm,
and that there is, over long-term studies, there's a greater success rate in recovery. So, um, somebody who doesn't have those resources might have a harder time processing that thing. So it's not actually the trauma itself that we need to judge. Is that, one on a scale of 1 to 10, is that an 8 or a
mhm,
10? It's not really that. It's actually like the resources of the person to process the thing, whatever that is, right? And so if we flip it and we say, you know, I want to be the kind of person that when you come into relationship with me, you feel respected, you feel calm, you feel like you don't have to defend yourself. If you do blow up or have a drama moment, that's cool. We'll get over it, right? But if I'm the type of person, then I'm actually doing that kind of work in the world, right?
mhm.
And that's sort of a way of being, and it kind of takes the pressure off for me to say, I have to qualify what really counts as trauma.
Right,
Because for some people, a really small thing might set them off.
right.
And that might be related to, I could talk about like intergenerational trauma, right? That might be coming up from something that we're not even necessarily aware of.
Mm.
So yeah.
I think what you just said, wow, that was a light bulb moment for me, but the resourcing, I think is that is
Yes.
such an important point to make is that, like you said, something for me that might cause a panicked response, but I know I can follow these steps to deal with this issue. One that we're having right now, we're having some bugs in our kitchen and I'm a little bit triggered by this. Um,
Yeah.
and it may sound silly, but it is very triggering for me for many reasons. But yet this morning we had the bug guy out. So I mean, I think that is kind
Yeah.
of a very simplified example of what you're talking about is yes, this is something I'm reacting to in maybe a disproportionate manner to what it is, but also I know what I can do to fix it.
Yeah, but and that's perfect that you said it. It's the disproportionate manner, right? It's
Mhm.
like coming into, and this is a very, I love like Buddhist psychology,
Mhm.
sort of Zen meditation, but coming into those spaces where, we feel such a sense of compassion or love or belonging or, a spiritual experience. I think sometimes that connection with a sense of wholeness, whether you're talking about being a Jesus follower or, other spiritual paths that are really important to people, but though that sense of connection and wholeness, then you start to actually see the disproportionate nature of the reaction. And I think that's the goal, right? Is for us to keep heading in that direction. So,
Well, Dr. Lesley Curtis, thanks for helping these two bugs get through their issues. We really appreciate it. And check out Dr. Curtis's work at Sagely Center as well as Lead Consciously. But Dr. Curtis, before we let you go, we've got one last question for you. Missy has the honor of asking it.
I will say, I feel like we've just kind of scratched the
I
tip
know,
of the
right?
iceberg
Yeah,
in
yeah,
this. And so, I hope I articulated correctly what I was trying to say. Probably not, but thank you so much. I did learn so much from you today. Appreciate your work.
Oh, thank you. No, I loved this conversation. Yeah, we could do it again sometime if you
I
like.
think we might.
You may want
Yeah,
to set up an appointment.
I know. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, so Lesley, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
My more to tell, I'm just gonna say something personal, which is there are um a ton of stray cats in Philadelphia, and we adopted one cat. She's amazing. Her name she's a black cat, and her name is Artemis. And it was really lovely because when my daughter was young, she figured out that black cats were less likely to be adopted,
Mhm.
and so that was her big social justice issue.
Oh, wow.
She goes to a Quaker school, so they teach them all about social justice, and so she wanted to get a black cat. But we actually have 3 cats because there's 2 that just showed up at our doorstep.
Of course.
Um, and we're very, I guess we're not very good at saying no to adorable faces. So my more to tell is just the personal story about
I love that.
how lovely our cats are and how nice it is that I get to do work from home because they're often present. So
That is
I
awesome.
love that.
On my interview bingo card, I did not have bugs or cats on my
No,
bingo
but
card, but I'm so glad.
we do have a neighborhood black cat who is a recurring character
Yeah,
on the
our audience
pod.
knows cat.
So
oh, that's
yes,
so
and his
sweet.
name is Cat, and he rules the street.
Oh,
Absolutely.
So that was very appropriate for us.
well, that's lovely. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed meeting you
Yeah,
both.
Leslie, thank you so much for joining us on Good Faith Weekly. You are welcome back anytime, and we really enjoyed talking to you.
Bye. Take care.
All right, to our audience, we want to thank you for joining in this week. Missy and I will be back next week, and until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.